get started. There's a link in your chat page that has the document for today. If you didn't get the email on it, you can download that now. And Otto's going to be talking about that today. Welcome, everyone. Hope you're learning lots. Isn't Otto a font of knowledge? He's just amazing. He opens his mouth and this stuff just keeps coming out. Just, he knows it. He knows it forward and backwards. So what a gifted teacher he is. I'm going to just share a couple of announcements with you and then turn it over to Otto and let him do his thing. Hopefully we'll get his guest in here. We'll work on that behind the scenes while he starts us out. I have two announcements I want to share with you. One is our upcoming conference, and I have to say, this is our best conference so far in terms of content. Because we're all virtual this year, it's going to be all online. We think we'll be able to reach a lot more people who are unable to attend an in-person conference, which is kind of an expensive and a big commitment. And this allows people to attend from home and not spend all that money flying and getting hotel rooms. So because we're doing it virtually, we can offer way more content than we could in person. And so we've got 29 breakouts. There are all kinds of wonderful topics and they're all under the banners of science, compassion, justice, and practical applications. So things you can do in your own site to do this work. And I'm really proud of these offerings. And then we have these amazing keynote speakers, including Adam Nimoy, who's the son of Spock from Star Trek, who tells the story about his recovery and his father's recovery and how that recovery brought them back together after being kind of separated over the years. So he's going to be here and talk about his journey. So that's kind of fun. Anyway, that's coming up October 17th through 19th. And you can register from our website, addictionandfaith.com. And I hope to see you there. I hope you'll come. The other event is a cruise. If you are in recovery and you want to spend some quality time with some other folks in recovery, we're going to be diving into Richard Rohr's book. We'll be on board a cruise ship. And this is in February 3rd through the 7th. It'll be in the middle of winter when it's cold and you need a warm break to go to the Caribbean. And we'll be meeting on the ship to hear presentations on Richard Rohr's book, Breathing Underwater. There'll be daily worship. There'll be daily 12-step meetings. And there will be small groups to discuss the presentations that are given. And then there will be plenty of time for just R&R. Just to relax, lay in the sun, think about what we've been sharing, how it applies to your recovery and your life. And we've done a few cruises before and they've just been really mountaintop events. So you can find that site through somebody's trying to call me who I think is in this class.
We're having the same problem as we did last week. The link that was originally sent to us is not working.
Yep. Well, let me send you a link and hopefully that'll work. Okay. They're having trouble getting in from last week. I'm going to send her a link real quick if I can. Got to chew gum and walk at the same time. That's not my favorite thing to do. Anyway, those are the announcements. And so the event in October and then also the cruise in February. And I hope you'll consider those possibilities of life enrichment.
Why don't you, Ed? Why don't you go ahead and help the folks get in? And because I've prayed before, so I think I could offer prayer again this morning.
Really? I thought you said you didn't have a prayer. Go ahead, Otto. Go ahead. I'll give it over to you. You say say a prayer, and then I'll help these guys get in here.
You want to get off your screen share too, so we can see each other?
Sure, I can do that. Hang on, Connie. I'll be with you in just a second. There we go. You're back.
Okay. Well, let's Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you humble thanks, hearty thanks, that you renew us every morning and every day. And we pray as we reach out our hands to all those who are suffering from all the results of being estranged from you, that we feel your power, we feel your love as we reach out to them. We pray especially that you help us to reach out to those who are troubled with codependency and chemical dependencies and addictions of any sort, and that they may know your healing love and your forgiving love. I pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. Okay. We got a couple more folks coming in. And a question for all of you is, what do you, and please everybody unmute if you will. So what do you, who can tell us any of the any of the 5 tools of flashing your brights? Any of those 5 tools? So everybody, please unmute. Even if you're not going to say anything, just go ahead and unmute so we can have a little conversation here. Any one of those 5 tools. Good thing we're going to do this review then. All right.
Say what you see.
Say what you see, which is be factual. Opinions, diagnoses are not generally effective. What is effective is being factual with the other person, saying what we see. What's another tool?
Say how you feel.
Say how you feel. Express your care, your concern for that person. Lots of times the folks that you are coaching or will be coaching will have loads of feelings, fears and angers and shames and so on. But the feelings we want them to communicate are those of their care and their concern about the problems, the facts that they're seeing. Those are the 2 tools that you can use every time, basically. And we want to see what are some of the other 3 tools that come up with certain opportunities.
Say what you know.
Say what you know. I keep hearing, I think, the same voice.
No, I've only shared twice.
Oh, okay. And that's good. I'm glad you're there. Say what you know. Sometimes you have the opportunity to give a person a piece of information because there's a lot of false information, a lot of misinformation, and so on. So sometimes we just give people a piece of good information. What's another instrument that you have, another tool that you have?
Say what you need.
Say what you need. Take care of your boundaries.
Oh.
I can't solve somebody else's problems with alcohol or drugs or any other addiction, but I can take steps to solve the problems I'm having. And sometimes I say what I need, and that means I'm enforcing the logical consequences of their behavior. And one more, and this is a great one for clergy. This is a great one for pastors. And that is?
Say there's hope.
Say there is hope for change. I don't know if I told this story last week, but I was out playing racquetball, and we were in a gym where there's lots of glass. You can see what everybody else is doing in the pool and in the weight rooms and so on. And even on a couple of the racquetball courts, we could see. And during a break in one of the games, one of my partners says, said what I did for a living. He says, wow, do you ever actually see somebody recover? And I could look around that gym. There's probably 100 people around there. I could look around that gym and see 7 people that I knew in recovery. one of the great things that those recovery programs offer us are this hope for recovery. And this is a great thing that pastors have to offer. Okay, I know we're picking up sound from somebody else's, somebody else there.
Happy birthday.
Somebody's singing happy birthday. So okay, good. All right, so we've done that review and we do not have the guy we need to have for the first part of this. So we're going to do the second part first. And people keep coming in. I want to talk a little bit about Alcoholics Anonymous. How many of you, and I can't see everybody right now because of the view we have. So I'm going to go to gallery view. How many of you, if you would be willing to show your faces and raise your hands, how many of you have been to a meeting, and people go to AA meetings as guests? So how many of you have been to an AA meeting or an OA meeting or a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, at one of those 12-step meetings? So, okay, a lot of you have been there. How many of you know somebody, that is, know somebody that you talk to? Yeah, I mean, you know somebody who's in a 12-step recovery program. I mean, well, you all know me, but that doesn't count. And I know Dave knows somebody, but Dave knows lots of people in 12-step recovery. Okay, Dave and I are good friends, so I don't mind calling him out. And I don't think he cares either. So I want to talk about what it is that makes Alcoholics Anonymous work. It is built on a number of pillars. Around 100 years ago, a well-to-do fella named Roland Hazard really wanted to quit drinking. And what he did, because he was so desperate, he tried so many things. He reached out to the psychiatrist Carl Jung. And this well-to-do man went to Europe to sit under Carl Jung's care for a year. Now, you know, a lot of people know who Carl Jung was, but he was a world-renowned psychiatrist, and he still is. And Dr. Jung worked with Roland for a year. And this is, by the way, this is one of the pillars of recovery, which is being willing to go to any lengths. So I don't know why it switches me back. I don't know if somebody did that to me or not. I do not want to be the dominant thing. Can you see me okay with this view? Because it really helps if I can see your faces. Those of you who are blacked out, I really wish I could see your faces. It just helps a lot. It's hard enough with just looking at the little tiny boxes, but I appreciate that if you take that step. So after a year of treatment with Dr. Jung, this great psychiatrist, Roland was ready to go out on his own and promptly got drunk. Dr. Jung, bless his heart, said, "Sir, I've done everything I know how to do. I've done everything science knows. My only hope for you is that you have some kind of spiritual awakening. So get with a religious group and see if you can make that happen." Well, Roland did that, and he did have a dramatic spiritual awakening, brought him into a new life, changed his life, and he set out to reach out to other alcoholics. Another principle of recovery is one alcoholic helps another. So he reached out to an old friend of his named Ebby Thatcher, and Ebby got the bug too, and he had a dramatic spiritual awakening and took on this second principle of reaching out to other alcoholics. One drunk helps another. This is a key element of recovery. One of the people he reached out to, and if you're not familiar with a lot of this, you may have heard of Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Bill too had a dramatic spiritual awakening. And Bill's life was changed. Never drank again, and the selfish, self-centered, self-serving alcoholic stockbroker became one who gave his life away to help other alcoholics. Bill Wilson went out and he went and visited the hospitals with other alcoholics and tried to help them sober up. And after months of this, he was frustrated, he was depressed, and he said to his wife about how depressed he was. And she said, yeah, but you know what, Bill? You haven't sobered up anybody else, but this is the longest that you've been sober. Another principle. We talk about recovery, 12-step recovery, as being a selfish program. And this is where the selfishness is. Doing you good does me good. I can reach out to you and give myself away without expectation of reward, and then the reward comes. Well, many of you will know the story. Bill Wilson was in a business trip in Akron, Ohio. The deal fell through. He was torn between whether he wanted to start drinking again, but he knew he needed to talk to another alcoholic. He went down the list of churches and found a minister who knew another alcoholic, and he went to talk to that man, and that was Dr. Robert Smith, the other co-founder of AA. They were concerned about this spiritual awakening business because very few people have that dramatic, bright lights spiritual awakening. But they had learned that there were people who have a spiritual awakening of an educational variety. And this is what prompted them to draft and write the 12 steps. That's why step 12 says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. That is, they had that spiritual awakening of an educational variety. So they also figured out that, like any other spiritual movement, they're going to have a book. And their book was all about stories of people who struggled and who recovered. But their book was also about something else. Their book also contained the philosophy that goes with the 12 steps. I'm going to pause for a moment. Ed, are you getting any texts from Duke? Because I am, and I can't answer him right now. I've got to turn it over to you. So, okay, sorry about that interruption, but we want to give you the full production today. They wrote that book. One of the guys who read that book was a businessman in Kansas City, Missouri, and his name was Charlie Miller. Charlie read that book, and that reading alone helped him to sober up. Charlie learned to believe in service. So you got the book, and now you've got service. And service, he's taught to everybody in Kansas City AA right up through 1970 when he met another businessman named Bob Patterson. And he taught Bob the importance of service. Now, Bob ran a manufacturing company. He had 50 employees. He was a big shot in his own business. And Charlie said, yeah, well, when you come here, you can make coffee. You can clean up the ashtrays. You can be of service in humble ways. And Bob was of service, and he was so much believed in service that he began chairing the newcomers group in Kansas City AA. Even on Monday nights, which meant in the fall that he was missing Monday night football. Bob was willing to go to any lengths. Into one of those newcomers groups walked a young alcoholic And after the meeting, Bob said, you know, do you have a sponsor? Bob believed in sponsorship. He says, do you have a sponsor? Do you have a mentor? The young guy said, geez, for our first meeting, I just walked in the door. No, I don't have anything. He said, all right, I'll be your sponsor. And the young guy who walked in that door is the old guy who's talking to you today. This story of recovery is always personal. My recovery goes all the way back to Roland Hazard and the principle that he practiced, being willing to go to any lengths. The idea of spiritual awakening, the idea of each one drunk helps another. The idea that doing you good does me good. That's a reason for me to reach out and care for other people. The idea that most of us who have a spiritual awakening have that more slow educational awakening. I'd been sober for a few weeks and I didn't really want to drink anymore. And I never could stay away from alcohol for more than a few days. I just really didn't want to. The craving was gone. And my sponsor said, that's because you've had a spiritual awakening of an educational variety. You've learned something, and that's what's changed you. That's God at work. The book, the idea of being of service without hope or desire for reward, all of those are principles of 12-step recovery. Do any of them sound like principles of our religious faith? Of course they do. The founders of Alcoholics Anonymous were Christian people. But they knew that when they worked with other alcoholics, many an alcoholic who had either had faith or never had faith, the ones who had faith had lost it because their lives got tied up around a false god. And then the false god betrayed them. And they often blamed the real God for their pain and their problems. Or they were so ashamed that they dared not believe in a real God that would obviously send them to hell because they were such terrible, had become such terrible people. So 12-step recovery talks about being spiritual rather than religious. And that's because we don't have a set of beliefs. We have a lot of principles and we have a lot of practices. People in 12-step recovery, Dr. Bob Smith wrote a prescription on, if you're old enough, you might remember doctors used to write prescriptions on prescription pads. And he wrote this prescription on a prescription pad, and it says, here's the road to this is my prescription for alcoholics. Trust God, clean house, help others. These are some of those principles or some of those practices that we find in AA. And these are spiritual practices, trusting in a power greater than yourself. I'm going to say more about that in a few minutes. Trusting in a higher power. Prayer. You can hear a lot of people talking about prayer in 12-step meetings. Meditation, being quiet. In fact, in the earliest days of the recovery groups, the 12-step groups, they said that daily meditation, the quiet time with God, was the most important element in their recovery. Now we'll always hear about the meetings. You got to be in the meetings. And people who've been in recovery for a long time will still go to 2, 3, 4 meetings a week. Not because they have to, but because they want to. It's fun. You're hanging out with people you love, and you can be of service to people who need you. It's another part of recovery, and of course, it's another spiritual principle, or spiritual practice, which is gathering with your community. Mentoring, being a sponsor to people who are new, that's another spiritual practice. Journaling. A lot of people in recovery will keep a diary. They'll keep that journal, that written record that helps them to process things. This is especially helpful for people because we have this obsessiveness, this compulsiveness. We repeat our thoughts over and over again. This is why we're worriers. We're not just afraid, we're worriers. We don't just get mad, we resent. We run those thoughts repeatedly through our head. And for many of us, capturing a thought by writing it down helps control that obsessiveness. And then we have principles like acting with integrity, being honest with one another. That's another one of those spiritual practices. Okay, Duke said, I'm still getting messages from Duke. Ed, are you getting messages from him?
Sorry, Otto, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm emailing him. I can't
Texting. He's texting.
I know, but I'm not getting his text, and I can't send the email over text because I'm not that capable.
Okay.
His email's got the link.
Well, what he says is because the meeting is now going on, it won't let him in. It won't give him the link. It won't give him the link to get in.
Yeah. Well, have him try the latest one I just sent. Because it's the one it should get him right in. Otherwise,
Try the latest link that Ed just sent.
Email.
In an email. I apologize. I just thought we had this all figured out. So much for me thinking. This is the 12 steps. The 12 steps, if I were writing them, I would write them differently. And almost everybody who's new to recovery figures out how they'd write those steps differently. Probably as people who are trained in theology, you would write the steps differently too. So it's these principles that underlie the steps, these spiritual principles that underlie the steps that are so critical. The first step, maybe we were powerless over whatever, and that our lives had become unmanageable. It's the step that says, I've been trying to work with a false God which has betrayed me. And not surprisingly, people hang on to that relationship with that false God because of how great it was at one time and how many problems it solved for them at one time. And they're still hanging on to that relationship. And this is why it's so difficult for us to take that first step. Even when we have been betrayed repeatedly and horribly, with prison and divorces and all kinds of things, people still hang on to that relationship with a false God. That's a hard step to take, to recognize that I've just been wrong. And it is a harder step to take because we say, you want to win, buddy? Admit you're beat. Now, this is a paradox, and Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step recovery has several paradoxes. And in our theology, which in my case happens to be Lutheran, we actually pretty well love paradoxes. So it fits us pretty well. But a lot of people can't make sense out of the idea, if you want to win, you just work harder, you keep at it. Especially guys talk like that. Just keep at it, you'll make this thing work, you'll get it under control. We're saying, nope, It's not alcohol, it's the addicted part of my brain that I can't get under control from my prefrontal lobes. That's the problem I have with control. So admitting that defeat enables us to move on to the next step, which is we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Same thing, Duke says, same thing. I wish I could get you guys to just talk to each other. Okay. This is a step about recognizing, okay, if I've recognized and owned that I've had a false God, that is a false higher power that I was looking to restore me to sanity and that repeatedly failed me, that simply means I've got to find good higher powers. Working as a treatment chaplain, people would often say to me, I don't have a higher power. So how'd you get to a treatment program? You got to a treatment program because the drug was your higher power. And you came to a treatment program because you knew that we knew things you didn't know, and that maybe if you worked with us and learned some of those things, you could be restored to sanity. So you've taken the treatment program on as a power greater than you that could restore you to sanity. That's not an almighty power. It's just greater than you are, and it can help restore you to sanity. So I encourage people all the time, have lots of higher powers. I do. I have only one highest power. And for me, because I am relating to a highest power, those higher powers are the instruments or the tools that the God of my understanding uses to connect me. So things like love and integrity can be higher powers that help restore me to sanity. Things like Mother Nature. Lots of people get restored to sanity by working with Mother Nature. I'm not one of those people. Well, yeah, listen, if I have to stay at a motel that doesn't have Netflix, I'm roughing it. Okay? That's where I'm at with nature as a higher power. But lots of people do get restored to sanity with nature. I get restored to sanity with sports. Not all of my insanities, but especially when my mood is lowered and my mood is a bit depressed, playing the game, having the fellowship, having the, getting the adrenaline release, doing all the stuff that playing does, helps restore me to sanity, puts me in a better mood. The love of family can be a higher power, can be a good higher power, can be a bad higher power. It depends on the health of the family. A circle of friends can be a really good higher power, also can be a really bad higher power. It depends on the health, the spiritual health of that circle of friends. So there's lots of higher powers that can restore us to sanity, that can help us to move into a positive, healthy life. Lots of higher powers like that. And for those of us who believe in God, who are open to a belief in God, those are higher powers that connect us to that highest power. The third step is pretty scary for a lot of people. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. Well, in Lincoln, they'll say, oh, does that mean I have to go down to 10th and O Street and sell Bibles? To tell you the truth, after 45 years, I've never seen anybody in downtown Lincoln selling Bibles, but that's how people respond. No. What does turning my will over to the care of God mean? My life? Well, what does God want for me? God wants me to be happy. God wants me to have a full life. And that means I have a life of service and recovery, a life of caring for myself and caring for other people. Now, what that specifically means may mean a lot of different things. It may mean lots of different things. But generally speaking, turning my will over to the care of God, or turning my will over to the care of any good higher power. What does AA want for me? AA wants the same things for me that any good God would want for me. What does it mean to be in concert with nature? The same things. So turning my will and my life over to the care of God means I'm committing to moving my life into a positive direction. Doesn't mean that I'm going to sit in a corner and say, well, God, tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it. I haven't heard from him, so I'm not going to do anything. It doesn't mean anything like that at all, because I pretty well know what God wants me to be doing. In recovery groups, we'll often hear people say, yeah, I know what God's will is for me. It's to do the next right thing. Some other folks will say, I can't always tell what God's will is for me to do, but I can always tell when I'm not doing God's will. So you get that kind of stuff in that third step. Those three steps, those first three steps are obviously foundational steps for spiritual recovery. And only step one talks about alcohol. People put all kinds of other words in there that they need to put in. You get into the next batch of steps here, and these are about making peace with the past so I can live today and step into the future. We make peace with the past by taking a fearless and searching inventory and blotting that out. I'm going to say puking that out all over one other human being who at the very least says, big deal. And at the very most says, everything you've done and said is totally forgivable. It's a question of whether you believe that God's goodness and power is bigger and better than your badness. It's whether you believe your higher powers are bigger and better than your badness. And so that's where we get into those middle steps, that cleaning house, because a driver, not a trigger, but a driver toward relapse is shame. I'm never going to be good enough to be accepted in a community. A driver is guilt. I'm so bad I can't be forgiven. So I'm not talking about good, healthy guilt that I can be forgiven and that helps move me on to something, to the next level, the next thing. That's not what this is. The toxic guilt, the terrible guilt that says I'm so bad, I'm unforgivable. The shame that says I'm not worthy of human community. All right. That's what opening that up with another human being, opening that up to our higher power, the God of our understanding, takes care of that and helps to push down those drivers toward relapse. And when those are pushed down, the third driver toward relapse, which is fear or obsessive fear, that too becomes more manageable. I can pick up my fears and take them to a sponsor, to a good friend, and say, this is what I'm terrified, this, that, the other thing's going to happen. And they can talk me down from that toxic level of fear to the kind of level which enables me to act, but does not paralyze me. Cleaning up the past also means making amends to other people. For many of us, that's just making apologies. For many, that's making apologies for sometimes means we got to pay back money that we stole. For sometimes it means we've got to take care of other kinds of damage that we've created in people's lives. All right. Once in a while, I talk to somebody who says, hey, I made amends and they didn't accept them. This didn't work. Well, making amends isn't about what they do. Making amends is about what I do. And they may not be ready to hear that you're now a whole new person. They may not be ready to hear that, and they certainly aren't ready to trust it. So they want to keep you at a safe distance. And that's their right. 10, 11, and 12 are ongoing steps. We continue to take inventory because, well, As for me personally, certainly I continue to make piles of poop that need to be cleaned up. So I just go ahead and do that. And that's what that daily inventory means, or regular inventory means. I can tell when I need to take inventory because emotions are welling up inside of me that seem to be unmanageable. And that means I need to take some inventory about what's actually happening. Step 11 talks about prayer and meditation, improving our conscious contact with God. And I disagree with that. It says praying only for knowledge of his will for us. Well, for many an alcoholic, certainly, prayer was a manipulative tool to try to get God to do what I needed God to do. It's where I was the higher power and God was a power less than me. And so they put this in here and say, all right, we're not telling God what to do anymore. We're just asking God to tell us what to do. And that makes perfect sense to me. But I would also add in there, we pray for other people. We don't just pray for ourselves and to do the right thing. We pray for other people as well. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message and to practice these principles in all our affairs. That's step 12. So we carry the message and we practice the principles. So step 12 says, if you want to keep this, you got to give it away. It's another one of those paradoxes. If you want to keep it, give it away. Okay. So I got just a couple more things I want to say. A lot of folks will not understand how 12-step recovery can possibly work. This is about one drunk helping another. This is about meeting in groups for drunks to help one another. There's no professionals practicing their profession. We have professionals in AA, but there's no professionals practicing their profession. There are no rules. You don't get kicked out of AA for getting drunk. You don't get kicked out. You come back the day after you've been drunk and say, I'm sorry, I got drunk again and I don't know what's going on. And everybody says, hey, better you than me, pal. Glad you're back. No rules. We have no membership standards. Well, we have one. You have to have a desire to stop drinking. It's the only membership standard. Used to be, they said you have to have an honest desire to stop drinking. And then in an attack of honesty, they said, we can't use the word honest in there. None of us had an honest desire to stop drinking when we walked in the door. We had a desire. We mostly had a desire to get a judge or a spouse or somebody else off our back. That was what our honest desire was. So we don't have membership standards. We're not in partnership with any other organization. We don't have AA hospitals or AA educational programs. We have no marketing plan. We have no money to speak of, and nobody's in charge. Who's the head of Alcoholics Anonymous? I think the correct title for that person would be the Secretary of the General Services Office in New York. If there's anything like a head of AA, that would be it. And Lincoln, Nebraska AA probably has 2,000 members. I'll bet we can't find 10 of them who could even tell you what the name of that person is. Nobody's in charge. We work by consensus. We actually work by deep democracy. Okay, I have lectured on long enough and we still can't get Duke in the room, can we? And
I'm sorry, I was looking for my unmute button. I'm working on it. I don't know what he won't communicate with me. He's texting you and I'm getting copies of those.
Okay, good.
But I'm sending him emails and I'm not hearing back. I'm giving him links to try, but I'm not hearing back whether they're working or not. Obviously, they're not working because he's not here.
This is time for us to take 5. And I'm going to figure.
Ed, can I talk to you for a minute? Because I'm kind of a Zoom expert.
Oh, good.
Go. Please do it.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so the link that you're using, is it the one where you click on the little uppy arrow next to participants and then it says copy invite link?
No.
Try that.
So the up arrow next to the
participants, where it says participants down in the bottom.
Yeah.
Click on the little uppy arrow and then click on copy invite link.
Yep.
Okay, now paste that into an email to him. Then tell him, no matter what message it gives you, just push through. It should work. But then whoever is the host is going to need to let him in. I noticed when I came in late, by the way, I apologize. I did have to wait a couple seconds until I was let in.
Yeah.
So give that a try.
Okay.
Yeah, also,
I'm doing that.
I had to register as well, as if I
Oh,
was
yes.
registering for the first time. And if he
That's
tries that,
right.
it does let you in, but I was a little bit late as well.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just a little slow to react because I got my mouth running and then so yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
you're a
Otto.
little bit
I'm sorry.
preoccupied. Yeah, and Melanie,
Otto,
you're going to have to stay after class for being late today. Just wanted
Oh,
you
okay.
to know that.
I have no problem with that. Otto, is there time for a question now or should I wait till later?
Yeah, we can do a question now. Shoot, I'm in charge. I can change.
You could do whatever you want. Okay, so thank you. Wow, what wonderful information. And so I have 2 questions. The first one is, and this might be a question for everybody. I would like to learn more about the 12 steps. I just for myself, in order to better be able to help other people, but also, wow, this is something that I think I could benefit from. So I'm wondering if anybody has a particular book that has been good for them about the 12 steps. If so, maybe you could put it in the chat. So here's my other observation. I have heard 2 schools of thought. One is 12 steps is the only best way for people who are alcoholics or addicted to beat it. Punto. But I've also heard people say, and I don't know if these people know what they're talking about, but I'm hearing kind of a groundswell of people saying, yeah, 12 steps. Yeah, not really. I mean, does it work? I don't think so. It doesn't really work. Yeah, okay, some people it works for, but it's just not that great. What the hell? I mean, everybody I know that I've talked to about a 12-step program, I know quite a number of people that it has helped and it continues to help.
Yeah.
So are you hearing things like this? This is maybe over the last, I don't know what, 3, 4, 5 years that
I've
am
been sober
hearing
for
this
50
sorts
years
of
and I've
things.
been hearing it for 50 years.
Oh, okay. So it's nothing new.
Okay. First of all, there are many paths to recovery. 12 steps or the spiritual principles upon which they're based are not the only way. Remember that when we're dealing with people who are 12-steppers like me, we tend to be obsessive and compulsive. So I know how I recovered, and this is the way you have to do it if you're going to recover. Because if I step outside of these boundaries of how I recovered, I might get drunk again. That's too big a risk for me. So this is the only way. And probably they're saying correctly, it's the only way for them. But the research is clear. Many paths to recovery. Now, typically when I've heard somebody say, I tried the 12 steps or I tried AA and it didn't work. Typically they were sober while they were in AA and then they quit and then they got drunk, or they got drunk and then they quit. Well, okay. I took that blood pressure medicine and then it didn't work. Well, when did it not work? Well, when I stopped taking it. Well, all right, you're really telling me it did work. So there's a lot of different pieces to that. And I've long said it is the spiritual principles, and I think somebody pointed this out in the chat. It's the spiritual principles that underlie the steps. There's nothing magic in the way those steps are worded. Now, I mean, I might be doing a heresy when I say that, but there really isn't. And in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, it said, look, God will constantly disclose more, both to the reader and to those of us who wrote this. So,
I think that the fact that there's no hierarchy, there's like no, I don't know, CEO or whatever. I don't believe there's even any like membership roles, right? Or dues or anything like that. And yet it keeps going on
Yeah.
and on and on. I mean, I think, I mean, that just, and plus everybody knows someone who has been helped
Yeah.
by a 12-step program, not just alcoholics. I think that speaks to the success of the program.
Yeah, and I should point out that the reason I think AA and other 12-step programs are successful is because of this. My personal mission in AA is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. AA's mission, which they say is our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. So my personal mission and AA's mission are perfectly aligned. And that's why all the other things that make organizations work become secondary or even non-existent. Because there's a lot of people who actively practice this for whom our personal mission and the quote organization's mission is perfectly aligned. The rest of the stuff can fall into place. Now, I've worked for a lot of good organizations where my mission and their mission was pretty well aligned, but this is the only one where it's perfectly aligned. Other comments or questions, as long as we're sitting here? Yes, Libby.
So for me, I'm right there with you, but for me, because we have no affiliations with any, religion, organization, we do not bring outside issues into being, our own. It's just that. And so I think, the powers and the principalities that have affected other wonderful organizations, perhaps we've avoided that by staying away from all those other things. So that when, when right now, when politics is really high in the United States at a meeting, no one will speak about it. It doesn't exist outside of the meeting. I mean, it exists outside the meeting, but not in AA.
Not in the meeting. I've got friends that I can AA friends I can talk politics with, but we go in the meeting and this is all we're about is that one mission. Stephanie, it looked like your hand was up, so I don't know if that just meant your hand was up or if you wanted to say something. Okay. Okay. Well, we can take a 5-minute break, and in the meantime, and in that 5 minutes, I'm going to have to do a little work that I was planning to put off till next week. So I'm going to prepare a couple of short talks. One about the organization Faith Partners, and the other about my current employer, the Center for the Restoration of Behaviorally Impaired Clergy. So
Otto?
Yes, Ed.
Somebody put a link, a call-in code and a access password, and it worked. Try sending that to Duke. He's not responding to me, so I don't know if I've got the right information. I mean, I'm hitting reply on your text and your email, so he should be getting it, but I'm not hearing back anything, whether it's working or not, whatever I'm sending him.
Otto, if you scroll down to the end there,
Yeah.
my meeting chat is the last one there, and that's just the code I use every week to call in. So I don't click on links. I tend to just have the numbers there.
I'm going to speak out loud. So, Duke, to join the meeting, use your phone. 827-8055-2008. The access password is 334494.
Hang on, Zach, is that a number to call, or is that no? It's not.
It's just
Zoom.
Zoom.
You
It
have
is
to
just
open
Zoom.
Zoom.
You got to
Yeah,
go to
you have
Zoom
to-
and put in that
yeah.
meeting ID,
Okay.
and then the password is, so that's a meeting ID. 827-8055 is not a phone
Right.
number, it's a meeting ID.
The first
And-
number is a meeting ID, period. Go to Zoom first and then use that number and the access password.
Now, is he getting that information? I feel like
Well, I'm texting it, so.
all right. Yeah, and I didn't mention at the beginning that we have a webinar coming up at the end of this month called God Shots, and it stars Libby Stalis, who's actually in this class.
Yeah.
Libby, do you want to say a word about your coming webinar at all? I'm sorry, I throw you on the spot
Yeah,
here.
since we have time. So in my sobriety, which I've been around for a long time, I have I realized that I have many, many experiences, which commonly in recovery folks are called God shots. And so I wrote a book about my own God shots, but the webinar is about exploring how anyone can be more connected to the messages, the experiences that let us know that a higher power is in our life, that inform us. Yeah, so I don't think people used to, I know people are like, these are big things that happen. They're that big religious experience. And I advocate that there are millions of tiny ones happen every day. We just have to find a way to connect with them and pay attention. So that's what it's about. Join me.
And then Katie's gonna put in a link to that. So there it is. Oh, she's fast. Just asked her, and there it was. So if you want to register for that, there's a link there. You click on that.
From Zach. And I don't have, now I can't remember how you open up the list of people getting in, but you can do it.
Oh, for the waiting room?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, he's not shown up in there yet. As soon as he does, I get a thing and I can let him in.
All right, we'll try one more thing. He thinks the problem might be that he's using his university Zoom account.
I'm using my university Zoom account.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So
yeah, I know he's kind of at his wit's end, like why, just like we are.
It's going to end up being some little thing that, yeah.
I'm going to have some more handout information about this next week. But because we have some time together, more questions or comments, I'm certainly open to that.
Otto, I have a question.
This time Stephanie really does have her hand up. Okay.
This time I really do. You talked about the perspective of AA and the perspective of an alcoholic in recovery, and I was wondering if you were going to say anything about codependence and recovery in Alanon.
Alanon was started by Lois Wilson, the wife of one of the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, which, as I understand it, they started it because she and other wives were about as mad as they were at their husbands as they had been while they were drinking. And they needed to deal with that. And they had every right to be that mad. I'm not faulting them in the least. And the principles that they needed to adopt in order to manage their feelings were also embodied in the same 12 steps, recognizing they were just as powerless over somebody else's drinking as an alcoholic is over his or her own drinking.
And the reason, yeah, go ahead.
And then trying to manage that person, trying to make things work right, all that stuff wasn't going to work. And just wasn't going to work. And that if they wanted their own peace of mind, then turning their life and their will over to the care of God as they understood God and so forth, cleaning up, what they would say is, I just take care of the stuff on my side of the street. I don't take care of the stuff on their side of the street. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the reason I bring this up is because while alcoholism might affect 10% of any given population, my anecdotal thought and opinion is that codependency affects probably 90% of any given population, and especially in church groups. A lot of us may not have a direct problem with alcoholism, but we have been affected by alcoholism or somebody else's drug addiction in such a way that we have adopted a lot of the isms that lend themselves to codependency, and that the 12 steps are just as inviting for people who do not have necessarily a drinking problem, but whose lives have been affected, really ruined by someone else's drinking. And I say that coming from both sides of the coin. So I can say that. And our lives are just as affected and our recovery is just as important. And I think if anything, it's a regular occurrence when I talk to people in my congregation who are dealing with their kids struggling with alcohol and drug issues. And so I think that this is something that's affecting a lot of people too and needs our recognition pastorally.
Absolutely. And there, perhaps nurses, but otherwise, I don't think any other group has as deep and profound a connection to codependency as pastors do, as clergy do. Why? Well, because if you're a responsible, caring person, at least sometimes you're going to fall in the ditch on the side of the road that's codependency. That is, you're going to feel responsible for another person's choices. You do that by worrying, resenting them because they're not making good choices, being ashamed because you can't influence them to make good choices. All those things happen. And we're a bunch of responsible, caring people. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in a room here trying to do this. And so, yeah, we are, and I say we, meaning me, prone to sliding in that ditch of being codependent. And I can be codependent on somebody with an addiction, but it's also really extreme. That is, people living in the ditch when they're in a relationship with criminality, with somebody who's criminal in their behavior, and they do the same kind of stuff. Just this morning, I opened up, my pastor and I are working on a sermon on codependency. And the title of this dialogue sermon is If God Was Codependent in the Garden of Eden. And it's hysterically funny in my view, but I think it's profoundly good. What she's drafted, it's not done yet, but it has a lot of dialogue between God and Adam and Eve, and how God feels so bad about what they've done and how he maybe just didn't do things right, and on and on. It's a really nice thing. Okay.
Real quick, Stephanie.
Yes, Jeff.
A comment to Stephanie about codependency and the number of people that are codependent. I don't know if you've heard of Celebrate Recovery, but it's a 12-step program. The biggest distinction would be that they identify the higher power in step 3 as Jesus. And so their motto is it's a Christ-centered 12-step recovery group. And they actually have specific groups for codependency. There are step studies and small groups and that sort of thing. But it's for more than people with just addiction to drugs or alcohol. It's codependency, it's overeating, anger management. And so they apply those 12 steps of AA and NA to a lot of issues across the board because they are so powerful.
There's at least two churches in our, there's at least 2 churches in our community with Celebrate Recovery groups. And it's as Jeff just described, very much about our God and Jesus Christ as the highest power, the power that we relate to, and they relate to all kinds of addictive sort of stuff, including codependency. Okay. I want to tell you about the Center for the Restoration of Behaviorally Impaired Clergy, because we have some time and it's my favorite subject now. About 18 months ago, some of us in the Nebraska Synod of the ELCA began to talk about the fact that we did not have programming in place for a pastor who goes off the deep end with an alcohol problem or another kind of issue like that, gets in a misconduct problem, and is ushered out of the ministry, ushered out of the synod. We didn't have programming for that. The problem came around because sometimes if you have a really good person, in our case, we talk about bishops and assistants, if you have a really good person who's working with the pastor, they will do great pastoral care and help that person get to the kind of recovery they need and be restored to their ministry. But it's highly variable from person to person. There's no consistency in terms of policy or practices. So we said, okay, that'll be fine. We'll write a policy. Yay. All right, I'll call some friends I know, and Ed introduced me some people in the Episcopal Church, and I met some United Methodists, and I know some people in the Evangelical Free Church, and some others, and we talked to those folks, and they kept coming back saying, no, we really don't have a policy for somebody whose misconduct is based on a substance use disorder or another kind of addiction, and we don't have a policy for restoring them. Now, this is ironic because most professions have policies and processes or practices to do that very thing. The medical professions, the transportation industry, they have those kinds of policies. So when I was applying for a grant with one of the church endowments, the person who's chair of the endowment committee said, shouldn't the church have been a leader in this? Well, you would think, but we're not. We find, and as I went around and talked to other people and some folks that I met through Ed, these people said, nope, our church doesn't have much. How can I help? Well, we have now become a nonprofit organization. We have a 9-member board of directors from half a dozen different denominations, and people from various backgrounds. When I told my friend who all is on this board in terms of their background, in terms of what they've done, a priest, an Episcopal priest, who also was a systems analyst for NASA and an aviation company, a retiring Episcopal bishop, a United Methodist minister who ran $1 million company along with his brother, a United Church of Christ minister who was heavily engaged in marketing and sales before she became a minister. Person who's on the, and Harold, I think, is here. He was here earlier. Harold, the seminary professor from the Pentecostal community, and so on. There he is. Okay. And Dr. Trulier. And it goes on and on like that. And I told my friend, I went down the whole list with my friend, and he said, clearly, this is the Lord's work. This is stuff that we need to be doing. So we have developed a policy that can be used on a adjudicatory or middle adjudicatory level, but we are in the process of now developing the programming. Policy ain't nothing if there isn't something to enact it. And we're in the process of developing the programming. There's a lot of education that needs to go on. There are procedures. What do you do when somebody has that misconduct policy? How do you refer them, and how do you make sure that that there's sound communication, properly respectful of that clergy's confidentiality, but still sound communication between the managers, that is the church governing authorities, and the therapy folks. And we have a way of doing that, and so on. But there's a lot of stuff that has to happen. We're going to be looking for sites, that is judicatory sites, where we can pilot this kind of programming in the next couple of years and develop it and refine it. And that's what I have to say off the cuff about the Center for the Restoration of Behaviorally Impaired Clergy. If you are one or know one, we can be of service. It's not about us developing a treatment program. Those professional programs that are for impaired professionals will follow somebody for years. So yeah, you have treatment, but they're the folks that help somebody get to treatment. You have treatment, you might have intensive counseling, intensive therapy for a matter of weeks, typically. And then you have counseling and structured groups for a matter of months. And then you have monitoring and support groups for a matter of several years. because for professional people to recover, this is what has been shown to be so successful in those professions. It's not, going back to Melanie's earlier comment, it's not the treatment modality. It's not the philosophy of the treatment program. It's how long recovery, how long the process lasts. And like other chronic diseases, surprise, 3 to 5 years seems to be what you need to have for some kind of monitoring, some kind of ongoing support. Not 3 to 5 years of intensive therapy, but 3 to 5 years of that kind of activity. This is the kind of programming we want to get implemented in churches, and I don't care any other religious group, but especially in churches across North America. That's really what we're looking for. So we are at the early phases of this. We became a recognized nonprofit about 2 months ago. And, and we just filled out the board in the last week. So we're just on the way. I am the executive director, which sounds a lot greater than it is, because I work out of the same office that I'm in right now, and just can only work 3 or 4 hours a day on this. So that's the thing that really trips my trigger today, and Libby's got her hand up. So yes.
I want to commend you guys, all of you who are doing this. In the 90s, I worked for 6 years with the Center for the Prevention of Sexual and Domestic Violence, which worked with religious communities on all of those issues. And we had a very strong curriculum that we wrote, and I traveled around the United States to judicatories around clergy misconduct. So just that piece. And I helped write many judicatories policies on misconduct, which come to find out or suspect that most of them are sitting in a drawer.
That's right.
And, there are some impairments that ultimately will not allow someone to go back into active ministry. But there are so many things that could be done early on to help, that could have saved congregations and the ministry of that person. So I just, and if there's any way, I have information, I can help you with it. It's been a long time since I've been in that thing, but I still am very dedicated to having any judicatory be able to really do something, to actually have a mechanism so that they can assist people rather than cover it up or eject. And the congregations need that immensely.
And you probably know Steve Lane.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm now on the board. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You're on that board, and Brian Sage, and they're both on our board. So
good. Well, I'll talk to them. I know Steve around one part of the Episcopal ministry. So now I don't know that he knows this, that I did this. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. I did put my email address up there. If you want to know more about this, please email me, and I promise to answer, because we just need to keep reaching out to anybody who's interested to help us make things happen. And now Dean Harold Trulier, who is also, well, technically he's not going to be on the board until Thursday, but I can't imagine that anybody would have the hint of a reservation about having him on the board. So other comments, questions, please. And this is we got about 5 minutes yet, and I would like to use those 5 minutes for your benefit. So comments or questions about the subject in general, or about the Center for the Restoration of Behaviorally Impaired Clergy. Yes, we do have a monthly newsletter, but honest, it's really short. You can get through it in about 30 seconds. So if you want to keep up with what we're up to, that would be a good source for you.
Otto, I was just reflecting on this work that you're doing for clergy who struggle with addictions. And I'm wondering what, if any, overlap there is with clergy who struggle with mental health. And if there's any conversations about connections or the need for something similar with mental health.
And it is about behavioral health incorporates mental health and substance use disorders and other addictions. It gets so complicated to you have to make a whole sentence. So that's what behavioral health is. So yes, we are concerned about all sides of the equation. There's lots of overlap between the two sets of disorders. People in trouble with alcohol and other drugs often have high levels of depression and anxiety disorders, and so on. So it's, yeah, they're both involved. So yeah. Well, I saw Stephanie's hand up again, but
the mental health piece is really important to me too. And there's some recent resolutions, at least in the Episcopal Church, where they're looking at mental health first aid, trying to get the awareness out. I wish that there were the same resolutions for with drug and alcohol, but chances are those have already been talked about and they're just not all together yet.
Yeah.
So there's some talk about it. There's certainly out there in books. I think there needs to be a lot more talk about it.
Yes.
Because what we don't talk, what our secrets keep us sick.
Yeah, that's right.
I just shared something from 2017 from General Council where there was a resolution passed to sort of pay more focus, and I think that was in light of something that occurred with a bishop that in a drunk driving situation where somebody was actually killed. So I think there was some energy and some momentum at that point. But since then, it just seems to have waned. And I know that people don't focus on it, certainly liturgically with communion, the way that I think they should in our denomination.
And frankly, that's why the Center of Addiction and Faith has taken off the way it has, because we're looking to fill that void, because our various church customs take a long time to pass these things and for actual movement to go on. And then we have really good forgetters in church land, and we forget that we've said we're going to do things and so forth. And it really needs the momentum that a nonprofit like Center of Addiction and Faith or the Center for Restoration of Impaired Clergy really needs that kind of attention.
We have a bishop, that former bishop, who repeatedly would say, "We move at the speed of church." It's just,
I think there's some irony, like at communion. I think that's the most tense point, at least for me, when I'm in service, because you effectively have to out yourself when you're asking, what's in the cup, and and sometimes that can be challenging for some people. And if they're new to sobriety, there's a point of tension there it shouldn't be that way. That should be a point of celebration in the liturgy.
Yep.
So I always love when the chalice bearer will stop and actually provide somebody a chance to actually honor the cup and understand that they may have taken the Eucharist in another form and whatnot too, but they'd still like to honor that cup versus just, okay, we'll just move on.
Yeah. Okay, looks like our time is just about up. So may the peace of God be with each and every one of you as you go forth and care for all those who are in your charge. Especially we think of those who are in trouble with alcohol, drugs, and other mental health.